Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, January 14th here. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'll be your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by Jason Moore and Matthew Betz.
The way you said that, Kyle, you made it seem like it's going to be different than usual. Like for today's show, I'll be your host. Aren't you always the host?
Today, I'm feeling a little bit of pep in my step. So,
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Tell you why. Why do you credit the pep in your step?
I feel prepared for the show. That's one thing.
Okay. Well, that's always a that's great. This is the first time. Go on.
And then also, I just turned the page from, okay, I need to turn my attention to these rookies to I'm fully in there. Like the switch turned today.
Nice.
It's a great place to be.
Nice. I think my switch has not officially turned yet. Like today we're talking about the 2025 rookie class, not the 2026
You're
yet.
not turned on.
And I mean, let's be careful with our words here, Kyle, but I will say that I am extraordinarily excited. I will probably be flipping the switch this week, if not Monday before Monday. So I'm looking forward to it. I can understand the feeling, the vibe you get when you go all in on the upcoming rookie class, one of the most fun times of the year. So that's where you are right now. You're diving in.
I'm in. I'm at.
You got the scuba gear on.
Yes, I was thinking it more of like I'm out on the dance floor and my eyes are closed and I'm vibing. I'm having a good time.
Okay.
I'm not looking around
All
at
right.
anybody else. It's just me. Betz?
I'm just picturing you, that scene, vibing, as you would say, as the kids say. You seem like you were a huge club guy back in the day.
Yeah, I was a frequenter of the clubs as the kid.
Down in
If
Atlanta.
I were to, knowing you, I would assume that if I were to watch you dance, I will be honest, I don't think it would be great. You're athletic, you're nimble, but like Andy is athletic, and I've seen Andy dance, and it's like you don't want none of that.
Don't you put that evil on me.
Do you have rhythm? Do you have like? I gotta watch you dance now. I gotta see this.
Okay.
There's probably somebody out there listening that is a good friend of Kyle who can answer this question. And if you can,
Who's got video
Please.
of Kyle dancing?
Yes.
please, probably from this weekend, right? Kyle, you were at a wedding.
I was at a wedding this weekend. I will be at a wedding this next weekend. So, maybe I'll get some footage, some fresh footage. But like,
Please.
there's kind of this in between with dancing where it's like, are you going for just I have the moves to okay, I'm being a little bit goofy here. It's like there's a spectrum of what you want to show out on the dance floor. But maybe you guys can just the whole time you're just going the entire time with the moves.
I mean, you know me. Come on. Let's be real.
I feel like you'd be robotic out there.
I'm like your classic, guy at a wedding dancing.
Not
Couple
so there's
drinks,
Not much.
a little sweaty, tie comes down. I'm nothing special out there, I'll be honest.
I think I've seen you dance a couple times, Jason.
Well, congratulations, my friend. I mean, that is a treat of epic proportions.
Well, I'm excited. And on this episode, what we're going to do is finish reviewing the rookie running backs. We started last week talking with Mike. We mentioned Genty and Hampton. We will finish talking about those and then get into the wide receivers, where I think there are some interesting discussions specifically about how players finish the year. It's like you can look at how people feel about Egbuka right now and then flip the script of how people feel about Luther Burden, because it is the exact opposite. But I want to give you a fun stat. Do you guys know how many top 24 finishes Luther Burden had this year?
Oh, this is great because
He's the hotness.
I do not. He is the new hotness. He was great. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the first half of the year he didn't do much of anything. Had big breakout before top 24. I feel like it's a low number, but I think that's the trick. So I would say like 2.
I was going to guess 2.
Okay. The answer is 2, which is as many as
Okay.
DeAndre Hopkins had on the year.
Yeah.
Not a stat you want
But
to hear.
there's I'm glad you brought up DeAndre Hopkins as the like, oh no, this is a guy whose career is over, he's done, he's meaningless and worthless, despite being a legendary wide receiver. because the reason we don't care about his 2 is because his career is over. The reason we care about the 2 from Luther Burden is because his career is just starting. And so you see this before. You see rookie wide receivers, rookie anythings, who just show flashes and flashes towards the end of their rookie season. And that's all you need to know, like, oh, this guy's got something special. The more that he gets involved, the more opportunities come, the more routes he runs or handoffs he gets, whatever position you're at, then you can prepare yourself for success. So I'm still excited for Luther Burden, although it does seem like Mr. Loveland is going to be soaking up most of the targets there. Kyle, how are you feeling?
Love him. Have him in Dynasty. He's definitely one of my favorite players.
If the listeners don't know, so pretty much Betz and Kyle have been at odds for a year in the Tyler Warren versus Colson Loveland debate.
This is not true.
It's very true.
It is true. It is true in the sense that Betz has been like Mr. Loveland. Yes. Well, I mean, I guess that is Mr. Loveland. But he was very bullish on Loveland. You, Kyle, you were not necessarily anti-Loveland, but you were very bullish. I mean, you're my guy this year was Tyler Warren.
My love
so you were Tyler.
Looks like hate.
You were Tyler Warren over Loveland, and he was Loveland over Tyler Warren. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair.
Yes,
but I'm not rooting against Loveland.
In Slack all year. I mean, it has been such a delight between you two on this. Anytime Loveland does something bad or Warren does something good, Kyle was talking, and then vice versa. Oh my gosh! Now that Loveland is breaking out, Betz is just. I mean, there's a fake persona that now exists about how much Kyle hates Loveland.
Oh, he despises him.
Honestly, I believe that now. I believe, Kyle, that you have
bought into this propaganda
for Loveland. I have so much fun.
It stinks because I have Loveland in Dynasty. I traded for him before the season because I needed him and wanted him, and I've been enjoying it. But yes, I like Tyler Warren, and we also have one of those things we'll talk about the rookie tight ends where it's like these seasons happen in such different ways. From it was slow for Loveland, and then Warren loses his quarterback. Where yes, now it is. It seems like it's Mike's full-time job to remind everybody and remind Betz that I apparently hate Loveland now.
Yeah, so good.
You do.
I love it. When is the rookie tight end review show, Kyle?
We'll be doing that in a couple of weeks. We will be doing, over the next couple of weeks, more overviews, and then we're about to get into these prospects. So I think that's kind of like the meat of what we're going to be doing on the show. We have an article up on the site right now, the 2026 NFL Draft Prospect Primer. If you're trying to get used to these prospects, everybody else, you know the names like Fernando Mendoza, maybe Jeremiah Love, but you're trying to get used to the rest of the prospects. There's a giant article out on the website if you want to look at that. But right around the corner on Super Bowl Sunday, we launch the pre-orders for the Ultimate Draft Kit, which includes the Dynasty Pass. So that initial look at those rookies, the production profiles, that will be out on Super Bowl Sunday, and then we will update it a couple of times. But I think that's the part that I want to make sure before we jump into today's show. Like, if you're not where I'm at, if you are not, the switch isn't turned on, then you're about to be, and we want to get you in on that process.
Just started on Team Opportunity this week. Had the lovely pleasure of reviewing the Washington Commanders season and the Tennessee Titans season. So I started
at the bottom, now you're here.
Exactly. Only up from here. But yeah, I love doing that exercise every year, and I think people find it really valuable too, because when you actually dive into like what is going on certain teams' rosters from a draft pick standpoint, contract standpoint, free agency, coaching changes, all that sort of stuff is in there. It just really helps you kind of understand the direction of where these teams are going. So definitely a very, very valuable tool. And like Kyle said, I mean, Super Bowl Sunday is not that far away, and it's coming fast.
Yeah. Congrats on the Commanders, who have basically nobody under contract other than Terry of significance.
It's Jaden. It's Terry. The Senator.
It's pretty bad. So go to ultimatedraftkit.com if you want to be in on that. But let's keep reviewing.
Hey, rookie. Welcome to the NFL.
So we're going to finish our conversation about the rookie running backs. We talked about Genty and Hampton on last episode. And this episode, we are going to discuss Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson, RJ Harvey. based on where they finished fantasy-wise, and then maybe a couple other names if we get to them. But overall, Jason, I want to get your sentiment. This year's class was supposed to be really good for fantasy, and I would say it was, but what was your overall take of just like, did they deliver on the promise of where we drafted them in Dynasty?
No, they definitely didn't. Now, what they did do is they delivered on the future belief of the players. Like when I watch what Henderson did, you go, oh, that is the guy that we loved. That's he broke out. He could be special. He could take that Jahmyr Gibbs type of leap forward. Genty, you watch him and you go, wow, that guy is so special. Definitely disappointing for where you drafted him. I mean, he was my, redraft bust pick because you're taking him in the first round and he's playing with a terrible offense, bad offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. And you saw that. Like, you were disappointed. It was a bust pick, but there was nothing that you saw and you went, oh no, we were wrong. These guys aren't good. RJ Harvey didn't get the opportunity easily ahead of J.K. Dobbins. So, the list goes on and on. I would say that for year one, rookie year, disappointment in fantasy output, in production, in stats. But I'm still very bullish on the future. I look at, we're going to be, creating for the Dynasty Pass that's going to launch here in a couple of weeks, a brand new from scratch Dynasty startup rankings. And I think that the rookie running back class will be very, very, very high, especially as I think this class came in at the perfect time because a lot of the stalwarts are starting to age out. Christian McCaffrey's going to be 30. Derrick Henry is obviously immortal, but super old. There's a lot of these guys where it's like, if you're in a startup draft, where are you drafting them versus others? And I'm very bullish on this rookie class.
Let's start off by talking about Quinshon Judkins. The Browns took him 36th overall. He only was able to play 14 games. So before we go through his season bets, kind of give us a little update of where he's at injury-wise, because it was week 16 when he had his injury.
Yeah, very similar to that of Cam Scatterbu with the ankle fracture and dislocation. He did have surgery on December 23rd, so unfortunately, Merry Christmas to Quinshon. Terrible timing. But he had surgery just before Christmas, and now kind of faces. You see reports out there. It's like 4 to 6 months. But for me, when I look at that, that is more the return to football activity recovery timeline. Really, it's going to be like closer to 9 months before he's kind of actually doing the things we care about in fantasy from a workload standpoint, explosiveness, all that sort of stuff. And sometimes even takes longer, like up to 10 months to really just regain your form and explosiveness and all those things. So I do expect him to be ready for week 1. I do not expect him or Scatterbu to be 100% in training camp in week 1. So it'll take a little bit of time to get back there. But generally speaking, players can come back from this injury long term. So I'm not necessarily docking Judkins in a massive way in the long-term dynasty lens. I do think when you think about what does the early part of his 2026 season look like, probably gets off to a slower start.
In terms of efficiency, it was really, really bad. Only Ashton Genty had a worse stuff rate, and 67% of his runs went for 3 or fewer yards. That was the highest rate in the entire NFL. Part of that you can look at and just say the team, the context of the Browns was this was a bad team. So 7 rushing touchdowns in 14 games actually is really impressive. And it was very clear once he got on the field, remember we had that little scare of like, is there a long suspension? What's going to happen? He was their dude, 34% of the team's rush attempts and targets. And for a stretch there, right, from like week 3 to week 13, it seemed like this dude was going to be super helpful for fantasy championships. And he was their dude inside the 5. Like they didn't waver. In our scouting report, I was looking back last year in these episodes, we talked about him as a red zone hammer. It's like, man, if this guy gets opportunities inside the red zone, he's going to be awesome. And one of the comps that we gave was Josh Jacobs, which I thought was just like a tough dude between the tackles. So I think from how we scouted Judkins to where he was taken in the draft and then even the production on a bad team, like I think he was solid overall. Jason?
Yeah, so I remember in the scouting process pre-NFL draft, I was not nearly as high on Judkins as you were, Kyle. You really loved Judkins' tape. I was like, he's a good player. He's not my favorite of this class. But when he landed in Cleveland, it seemed genuinely perfect for him. Even though it wasn't a great offense, you didn't assume there'd be a ton of scoring opportunities this year. They needed him. It seemed like a Nick Chubb replacement, which he was. He came in and quickly became the guy. It was tough sledding for him. He's not out there running at 5 yards per carry with that kind of an offense with Shedeur Sanders and Gillen Gabriel behind center and all the things that they had to go through. The team, the offense just was terrible. Once they drafted him, though, I was bullish on him. I think, prior to the offseason, will he play football, domestic violence, all that issues, he was my number one. I always forget about Genty as a rookie. He was my number one of the rest fantasy projection, and I think he had a successful rookie year. Now, I am pretty concerned about this injury, though. I'm concerned for two reasons. Not long-term health and whether he can come back from it, and he's very young. He's 22 years old. So maybe he doesn't come back to full strength right off the bat this season. Maybe he gets better towards the end of the season. But the issue is, like, one of the things I loved about Judkins was the depth chart. They really didn't have hardly anything there. They barely brought back Jerome Ford. And obviously they drafted another rookie, but he was an undersized guy that Quinshon Judkins was the dude for them. That's what they wanted. But now with that injury and with the depth chart being so bad, it feels like a team that needs a running back. Like, I don't know that they can go into next year saying, well, we've got Judkins, we invested in him, he's our dude. If I don't know that timeline. I don't know how ready he will be in training camp, in pre-training camp, before the draft, when free agency opens up. Will they have enough information on Judkins to know, can we rely on him in week 1 or even in week 5? In which case, they might go out and make a splash. They might draft someone. So it's one of those, like, I liked what I saw. I think he's a good player. If his opportunity stays what it is after the NFL draft and after free agency, I'll be bullish again. Right now, I'm kind of holding my breath on what his future looks like.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think, just to piggyback on all those points, it's sort of a thin needle to thread for me in terms of, like, a true year 2 breakout happening right out of the gate from week 1 on, because we talked about the injury, but also, like we talked about with Genty last week, like, there's, even if they're a better team, there's definitely some more systemic concerns just in totality on what's going on in Cleveland. Same as what we talked about with Vegas. Like, when your expectation for win totals and points every week, hinges in like the 17.5 to 20.5 range, it's hard to be a top tier fantasy running back because touchdowns obviously are very important. So it's a thin needle to thread for me in redraft, where we look ahead to 2026 of how this goes for him, where it's like, oh, what an incredible season. So he's more of like to me, more valuable in Dynasty piece, I think, at the running back landscape, where the injury could slow him down to start the year, but we all think he's pretty talented. He's got the size and speed profile you look for that can develop into a true bell cow. We already saw it as a rookie. So there's a lot to like for his entire kind of picture and profile, but I do agree. I think it's possible we see him as like a better Dynasty asset to have than like a redraft target for this upcoming season. And
I don't consider him a player because he's injured. You need to go get him. He's a hold. If you drafted him, you're just going to have to wait out this period where you're figuring out his injury situation. But he belongs in the NFL, and he saw 18 plus touches a game. Like, that's significant for a rookie running back. So I think overall he made sense where they drafted him. Would you rather have Quinshon Judkins in a startup? So let's give that context. Or RJ Harvey?
I personally would probably rather take Judkins.
I would as well. The age gap there, 22 versus what's RJ
Almost
Harvey?
25.
24? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the 3 years.
But what if you said, like, who's going to score more touchdowns in 2026 as part of the equation? You probably guess it's Harvey, right?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly would say the Broncos score a lot more touchdowns than the Browns do next year. The RJ Harvey was pretty good at getting in the end zone this year as a rookie, despite not being on the field a ton. But those seem like the type of touchdowns that are very hard to bank on. Whereas Judkins, touchdown opportunities are the ones where you can go, okay, this guy gets the work inside the 5-yard line. He's their goal line back. So, yeah, I mean, I would probably lean the needle towards R.J. Harvey, but not in a drastic way, even despite the offenses being drastically different.
I guess we should probably talk about Harvey next, and we'll just go right into it.
We can talk about that. I find it hard because talent-wise, I think Judkins is a better player. I liked him better pre-draft process. I think was much better in a lot of areas inside the red zone. But then you look at, like, man, which team's going to be better? Like, that's where I feel conflicted, because when we look at R.J. Harvey, they took him in the second round, 60th overall. I think that surprised a lot of us. We thought he was kind of there in day 2 in the mix, but 12 touchdowns, including 5 receiving, was kind of the main thing, but he was not the dude until J.K. Dobbins was hurt. So I look at the way this team won. It wasn't because of Bo Nix. It was because of this offensive line. Really, like, it was their defense and their offensive line was the way that the Broncos became the number 1 seed. And Harvey benefited from that in the second half of the season. So do you think he will be overvalued because of the touchdown production? Like, is he more valuable moving forward, like in a trade piece this offseason, than he is to your team the next couple of years?
I think probably.
That's how I feel too.
I mean, given how they used him, given the opportunity to really have him truly break out, I will say this. We have more information still coming. Like, they're in the playoffs. If they beat the Bills and make a run and it's on the back of R.J. Harvey, the continuing rookie breakout can still happen. I reserve my right to change my opinion here. But in the regular season, you know, they had opportunities to they gave him the ball, 17 carries, 19 carries, 14 carries, 15 carries. With J.K. Dobbins injured, no one else on the roster to really do something super special. They gave him opportunities, and I wasn't personally blown away. I mean, he was pretty good. He scored a lot of fantasy points, got in the end zone a ton. I don't know how I feel about R.J. Harvey. I looking at what he did down the stretch, the offense he's on, I feel like I should be really bullish. And for some reason, I'm not enamored. Is that just because he got off to a slow start this year? You know, the first 6-7 weeks of the season, he did pretty much jack squat, and he couldn't overtake Dobbins. It took a Dobbins injury, and so I think that's kind of why we're like, but it took a Ramondre injury for Henderson to get the opportunity to break out. So I don't know. I feel like maybe we're being a little too. I'm working through this, and I think maybe we're being too negative on R.J. Harvey.
I think there's certain
because of.
Go ahead, Jay.
Just the combination of because of his age and the fact that he didn't overtake J.K. Dobbins, and it took that injury to get the opportunity down the stretch. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think he's a player for me that, and this might feel like a cop-out answer because kind of it is. There's certain players that you have like really strong convictions on, you really like, you know, all those things that you want to be in kind of no matter what. There's other players where you're like, I'm out no matter what. And there's a ton of players in the middle. And to me, RJ Harvey is like very price dependent from a startup cost, from a trade value piece. To me, I would love to have starting running back for the Broncos in Sean Payton's system as a blanket statement. I feel like RJ Harvey, what he showed as a rookie, like you look at his numbers, among 49 qualifying running backs that had 100 plus carries, the peripherals were not great. He was 42nd in yards per carry, 40th in rush success rate, 46th in EPA per rush. And that's while the Broncos offensive line was still operating at a top 5 rate. So considering all that, I saw on the field this past season, largely a fine NFL player, but probably a guy that's not irreplaceable is how I would put it. Now, obviously it's Dynasty and we're looking at this kind of in a 2 to 3 year window. I think the opportunity will be there in the next couple seasons, but as Kyle mentioned, he's already 25 years old. And so if somebody is like so in on this guy because of the perceived role in this offense, I'm willing to see the downside here and kind of take the other side of it. So that's a cop-out answer for me. I think he's fine, but I also wouldn't be surprised at all if this team either brings Dobbins back and or invests elsewhere, because you know Sean Payton loves his committee backs, and we saw that a bunch this year. So maybe the playoffs change that for RJ Harvey, but overall I see a player that's pretty good, but nothing incredibly special.
58 targets is nice. We kind of talked about that as part of his game. Explosive. The explosive plays is what we saw at UCF, and yet I feel like I remember this season of like there's 3 or 4 plays where RJ Harvey just busted one, but the rest of them were just like stuffed the line. That was what I remembered. But 58 targets is tied for the 5th most among day 2 running backs for the last decade. That's a really good number as a rookie.
It's a really good number, and it actually is far better than that. It, again, took the J.K. Dobbins injury, but if you look at like after the bye week when they really started giving him the workload, their final 6 games, that stretch he was on pace for 73 targets, 53 receptions, which would be, I mean, if you're telling me, hey, I get a running back on a good offense with 73 targets, I pretty much don't care about almost anything else. I know that they're going to be fantasy relevant. And then he got 240 carry pace. Now he didn't do much on the ground with it, but I want to see what they do in the draft. Whether I agree they could bring back Dobbins, they could grab another running back. He wants a committee, but RJ Harvey could easily be a top 15 back next year.
Yes.
So I don't want to just crap all over him and be like he's old. If the next 2 years he's a top 15 running back, then you probably made a mistake trading him away.
Yeah. And I think if we said, like for me personally, let's say Judkins was in this spot on this team, without injury, I'd be like, oh, well, the ceiling's a lot higher there because I think Judkins is a better overall player. But in full PPR, if you're seeing this type of receiving production on a really good offense with a good offensive line, I won't call it a really good offense. I'll call it a really good offensive line that's fortunate to be in really good game scripts because their defense is so good. You hit because where you drafted him was the back of the first round in your rookie drafts. And that, to me at the time, I was scared. I was like, I don't know if I really believe in this player the same way. It's kind of irrelevant at this point, where it's like the situation and the opportunity turned into a really, really good one. So overall, if you drafted him, you're probably really happy that he finished the year the way he did, and you counted on him as like a high-end RB2. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk about some TreVeyon. I'm not sure if we've had a running back in recent memory that has given this much of an emotional toil for the first 2 months of a season like this. I mean, it wasn't just like, okay, we saw a little bit here and there. It was 2 months of, if you drafted him in a redraft, you thought, I wasted my pick. And then in Dynasty, I took him at the 104 in a draft, and I'm sitting there just thinking, I could have had Judkins, or I could have gone somewhere else.
The first 8 games, like you said, the first 2 months of the season, he had 228 rushing yards. He played every game. 228 rushing yards. That's a half a season. And he basically was irrelevant. I mean, didn't even have 100 receiving yards. This was a player that was just a cast-off afterthought. This is why we get so angry at coaches. Because if Ramondre didn't get injured, I don't know that we do know. We know that they were not going to just go, okay, TreVeyon, you're the dude. It took the injury, and I guess this is why, like, we just talked about this with RJ Harvey. It took the injury for him to get it. The difference is once he got it, it's like, oh, man, Henderson dominated. Just 50-yard touchdown run, 50-yard touchdown run, explosive play. RJ Harvey had a few good plays over the course of that second half of the season. Henderson had a few good plays over the course of a few more opportunities. He was just so good, so fast all the time. And it's so silly to me. We get frustrated because we're like, we believe he is better and you should give him more opportunities. We don't know anything. We're not there at the practice field. We don't know the pass protections and all the meetings he's in or isn't in and all of this stuff. But then when we see this kind of proof in the pudding where it's like, you were wrong. Like Vrabel, I love Vrabel. Vrabel's a great head coach. He was wrong, or whoever was the decision maker. Maybe it wasn't Vrabel, putting the offensive personnel out there. Maybe it's the offensive coordinator. Maybe it's the running backs coach. I don't know, how their team operates in that fashion. But whoever it was that was giving, 6, 9, 11, 5, 3 rushing attempts a game to TreVeyon Henderson, they were wrong. Period. It is a objective truth. You know, it's when they were forced to give him more, he won them games and dominated in a way that Ramondre couldn't. And so then when Ramondre came back, they're like, we should give Trevo a lot more work, and they did. So I think his role and like even in the playoffs, Ramondre was awesome. Ramondre looked so good. He looked like their best offensive player. They're not going to go away from Henderson ever again because he showed how special he was. It's just dumb that it took their hand being forced. Why can't they force their own hand? Why can't they just go, you see that guy? He's really fast. We should get him the ball.
I wish it was that simple. Don't you?
Yeah. Well, you know, they only spent the 38th pick overall in the NFL draft on him. Why would they want to get him involved?
Very true. We talked about this a little bit last week, kind of just hinted at where TreVeyon is and all that sort of view in the landscape. And I mentioned this to Mike, and he was like, get this out of here. Ramondre actually ranks ahead of TreVeyon in a lot of the advanced metrics. Now, a lot of those sometimes are pretty noisy. But like you said, to Ramondre's credit, like I pretty much wrote Ramondre off this past year from like a redraft standpoint and like wasn't really targeting him and all those things. He's been good this year. And I don't know like how much of it is him versus Josh McDaniels, whose scheme has been awesome, Drake May. Again, I'm sorry, Patriots fans, the schedule. There's a lot of things that worked in favor of this offense overperforming maybe some people's expectations. I'm not saying it's going to regress next year. I think it's a very good team. But I also, like talking out of both sides of my mouth, I think that Ramondre will still have a role next season. Doesn't mean he's going to dominate the way he did this year and take over in terms of being the RB1. But TreVeyon, to me, these are the guys I love betting on in Dynasty, where you do not need to have the volume to be a very good fantasy back. TreVeyon is so talented that he can still be a very high-end running back for fantasy and for Dynasty without having 23 touches a game. But if they actually give him that, goodness gracious, like Judkins, right? I think he's a pretty good player. I think he's very talented at what he does. He kind of needs like 19 touches in a game to like really get there. TreVeyon could do it in 15 touches, stuff like that. So these are the backs I love betting on in Dynasty, where the draft capital is there, the talent profile is there, and the arrow is pointing up on the offense. So even though I do think Ramondre might be a thorn for another year in the side of Henderson, obviously still very in on him from a Dynasty standpoint.
The question is, does he go the way, so Henderson, of Achane and Gibbs, where it's not just they're hyper efficient and there's big plays, but then there's this next level where the Raheem Mosterts and David Montgomerys of the world slowly subside, and these people enter another stratosphere. Like we saw with Achane this year, where he was the most consistent back in football, right? Aside from like CMC and Bijan, Achane was unbelievable, and he was the dude, right? Like we had to wait a couple of years. Same thing with Gibbs. So do you think that there's that type of ceiling, Jason, for Henderson in the next year or two?
Yeah, I definitely do. I'm glad you said year or two, because I do think it'll be a 2-year stretch. Ramondre's contract is enormous. He got a new contract recently.
Great work
he is
from
not
his
going.
agent.
Yes, he's not going anywhere. It will be a two-headed monster, similar to, more like Achane is alone. They've been trying to figure out like Ollie Gordon, right? Like who else can we have? And they just don't have anyone. With Gibbs, David Montgomery is a good quality back. And so his second year, it was still a pretty decent split. I mean, genuinely, like David Montgomery worked in a lot, but you had Jahmyr Gibbs go from 253 opportunities his rookie year to 313 his sophomore year, and that was with David Montgomery working in a lot. I don't necessarily expect the Patriots to be as run heavy and as run successful as 2 years ago's Detroit Lions. Like that, their offensive line was the heart of their offense. Like that was the machine that made it go. The offensive line is something that's improving, but has not been a strength of the Patriots necessarily, certainly not to the degree of the Lions. So I don't know that the opportunities will be there to have the total team amount of rushing attempts, but I fully expect TreVeyon Henderson next year will get more work than Ramondre. He will get more work than what you saw the split with Ramondre and TreVeyon on the field together once Ramondre came back, but it will not be solo. He won't get all the work. And really, it took year 3 for Gibbs this past season where it was like, man, we're really hurting ourselves when we take Gibbs out and put the ball in David Montgomery's hand. So more and more, I mean, Gibbs went from 313 opportunities his sophomore year to 337 in his third year. I think that there will be a very, very similar percentage-wise bump over the next 2 years for TreVeyon Henderson. So he's going to be highly drafted next year in redraft, and I believe he's going to pay off on that. There's not 20 guys in the NFL that have the explosiveness of TreVeyon Henderson. And most of those guys, when you talk about that level of true athletic freak explosiveness, those guys are in the first 2 rounds of fantasy drafts usually. That's where Gibbs goes. That's where Jamar Chase goes. That's where those, Achane and just the crazy, like, I can take this 80 yards to the house, if nobody can catch me.
Yeah, and I think that Gibbs comp makes so much sense where you can see more work in year 2, but really year 3 is like the runway is cleared for him kind of thing, and they just can't keep doing it with Ramondre. I think that makes a ton of sense. I will say a couple more points on that. We did see the bell cow capabilities of TreVeyon when Ramondre was out. 20.3 total opportunities per game on 80% of the snaps. So we talked about this in previous seasons with Montgomery and Gibbs. It's like, well, also, if the other guy misses time, you also have a true workhorse every down back on your hands. So I think that's the case with TreVeyon for sure. And then I will say from an efficiency standpoint, we keep bringing up Gibbs. It's very funny how they comp out here. 5.7 yards per touch this past season for Gibbs. James Cook was at 5.6. For context on kind of where TreVeyon was at, 5.3. Same with Jonathan Taylor. They were tied. So he's kind of already approaching that level of efficiency, or at least he did it in his first season. Of course, things could change. But just to highlight, kind of that's what we're talking about here with the trajectory of Henderson. So definitely an exciting piece if you have him on your squad.
Yeah, he's going to be a fun player to talk about all off season as well. I know they're in the playoffs right now, so there'll be more to add to the conversation. But I did so many deep dives on him of like what worked with him, what didn't work with Ramondre. So just an interesting player because he was number 1 in yards before contact, which you could say, oh, his offensive line was good. It's like, no, nobody touched him on a couple of these like 60-yard runs. And then it says that he's last in yards after contact, but that's just kind of hurting him because he had these long runs. Where it's like, if you have a 60-yard run and no one touches you, that actually hurts your yards after contact because you didn't gain any. So anyway,
right.
Funny.
Yeah. 0 yards after contact because no one could contact him. He sucks.
Yeah, that they all need context, and he's definitely one of those players. Real quickly, before we move on to wide receivers, I just want to give a couple of shout outs to some other rookie running backs. It was a wild ride, and it was a really wild ride for some day 3 guys that got in the mix. The Cam Scatteraboo, Woody Marks, who in the playoff game looked pretty good. We had Kyle Monungai, who 43% of his carries this year went for 5+ yards. That was tied for the most in the league. He was really good. And then we had Bill, who was the hottest thing ever to irrelevant to the end of the season. Go, okay, it wasn't so bad. 808 on the ground.
He is currently the only running back under contract entering the offseason.
For the Commanders?
Only in the entire NFL. Yes, for the Commanders.
Only Bill could do that. Any quick thoughts?
Bill Krosky doesn't sign contracts. His word is his bond.
Betz, I know you're a bit Byshal Tootin guy.
Yeah, I think Tootin's at least worth mentioning here just because Travis Etienne is a free agent. Now, Etienne is Trevor's boy. He performed very well this year. I could see them bringing him back for sure.
Please bring him back.
But if you recall the conversation after the NFL draft, there was a lot of like, oh, the GM wanted this guy. They targeted this guy specifically. And I think Tootin showed on his limited touches, like, he's got the juice. This guy can play. He was awesome in the playoff game. They didn't really give him much volume, but he made a couple of really big plays this past weekend. So just wanted to highlight that if they, for whatever reason, will move on from Etienne and don't bring in like a next bell cow kind of back, I mean, his value is going to skyrocket. So just a guy to monitor throughout the offseason.
Yeah, it seems like with the offense as a whole, the Jacksonville Jaguars are a top half offense. You expect a lot of touchdowns scored with Liam Cohen going into next year. And so if Etienne comes back, he's very valuable. If he goes away, Tootin is very valuable.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll talk about some.
You forgot one.
No, did I?
Well, Caleb Johnson.
Oh, Jason.
He is in the dock.
You did it to yourself, man. We could have just swept it under the rug and moved right on.
I know.
I like that accountability.
Look, we bring up our own wounds. We don't get everything right. I loved Caleb Johnson. You can't have a more drastic fail than basically not being active. I didn't see Kenneth Gainwell being a superstar running back in the year of 2025, but he was great. It's interesting the contract situation. I don't think Gainwell's under contract.
Correct.
I don't know. I'm assuming that they're not going to fire Tomlin, but who knows? 5 straight playoff exits of double digits. Maybe they'll take time to evaluate, and next week there's breaking news or not. But there's going to be change in the offense. Quarterback, everything. I mean, this is a situation to monitor, and so I don't know. Is there any hope? I believe there isn't any hope for Caleb Johnson.
There's no hope?
I mean, it's just like
I can give you.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where it's like
I can spin it for you.
Yeah, spin it for me.
Okay, Rodgers is gone. Let's just say there was something there. He didn't like the rookie, blah, blah, blah. He's gone. If Arthur Smith's gone, even better in terms of switching that up. You definitely want Kenny G out there, and he's going to go wherever Rodgers goes, which might be Cabo. So he'll be gone there. But Betz and I figured this out last year. If you are a day 2 pick and you are actually not used a ton, your usage almost doubles the next year, regardless of it. You just need to be a day 2 pick.
So he's going to get like 20 carries?
I think he had what? How many carries? He had 28.
I don't know.
For 69.
Okay, so he's going to get up to 50, 60 carries.
He had 69 rushing yards.
Nice.
And a catch.
Yeah. All right, let's move on.
All right.
Hold on.
Go for it, Betz. You had a thought.
Kyle just cuts me off. He's like, "We're done." Ads. This kid looks so stupid in hindsight. I think he's like the perfect guy if you're like working on a trade this offseason and you're like stuck on like a 3rd round pick or a 2nd round pick, which we all get that way, right? In trades. He's like the perfect guy. It's like, I don't know, man, just throw in Caleb Johnson. Because I do think there is a world if they move on from Rodgers. Rodgers is like such a trust, I'm getting my guys, I'm deciding who's on the field type of player. If they move on from Rodgers and they go with the split backfield of Jalen Warren and Caleb Johnson, I think the light is on. Now, I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. Don't put up, major.
We're never wrong. We're just early.
Exactly. Don't go out and trade for this guy. But if you're trying to like Trojan horse it, just throw in Caleb Johnson because he did nothing this year. That's what I would say about it.
Okay, I'm going to send some boo-boo offers for him and see what happens.
No, that's not what you do. You try to trade for other players and then get him in the deal. Kyle, come on.
Nobody wants this guy. He's barely in the league. Let's move on to wide receivers, which, changing gears, overall, y'all's sentiment on this year's rookie wide receivers, mine's just kind of, it's not great.
I would say pretty good.
We got some
good hits.
This is, I think, the most interesting postmortem of the season is the rookie wide receiver class. Coming into this last year, we were coming off of a year where Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, we had 3 top 12 rookie wide receivers in fantasy football. And we knew going into last year that was a special class. That's to say nothing of Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that was supposed to be a really deep wide receiver class. Coming into this year that we're talking about right now was supposed to be a very good running back class and a very weak wide receiver class. The wide receiver class was like, okay, Travis Hunter isn't really a wide receiver. He's a cornerback. We're not sure. You got Tetairoa McMillan. Okay, he should be a stud. And then it's like a hodgepodge of question marks. As the season started, it seemed like, man, okay, we are going to be good. Travis Hunter is going to be a wide receiver, not a cornerback. He's going to play a little cornerback, but he's going to be a wide receiver. So you got Travis Hunter, Emeka Egbuka, outstanding. He's going to be he's the next Justin Jefferson. You know, you still had a first-round wide receiver draft pick in Matthew Golden. That, like, there was, I think, a period of time this year where it was like, man, were we wrong? Was this a really deep, good wide receiver draft class? And now come to the end of the year where Egbuka just disappeared. Travis Hunter obviously got injured, but even though we could say the breakout was coming because he had one game, it was still just he had one good game at wide receiver before the injury. Matthew Golden is who we thought he was, or at least who we thought he was, not who the Green Bay Packers thought he was. He's not a first-round wide receiver. Not that good. Jaden Higgins disappointed. Okay, maybe a late breakout from Luther Burden, maybe, but that's Mr. Loveland's team now. It's like this, me looking at this wide receiver class, I think it panned out how we thought it would pan out during the early off season, which was pretty negative on wide receivers. I don't think this was a good class.
We are who they thought we were, kind of thing. So like Egbuka, just to give some context, those first 5 games were the second most fantasy points of all time scored in the first 5 games of a rookie wide receiver. So it's not just like, Puka is the only one that's better. And then it's this historical drop-off. McMillan was a rough ride for the first half of the year, where you were like, okay, he's getting the targets. Because like his target share at the end of the year looks awesome. 27%. That is a top 5 mark all time for a rookie wide receiver. Really good. And yet it really took a long time to get a...
And you're talking about Tetairoa McMillan.
Tetairoa McMillan.
You just said McMillan after Egbuka, and I thought for a second you were talking about his teammate. But yeah.
I thought Tetairoa McMillan was exactly who I thought he was, as he's a target earner, big-bodied, and he ended up with 1,007 touchdowns.
He's going to be a dominant stud. I truly believe that.
Yes, and that was part of the equation. This is Drake London. And Drake London took a while to develop, but you know that this is alpha-type stuff. And the way that they drafted him in the top 10, it was there. His season, he finished at wide receiver 17, was really, really good. But Egbuka is the exact opposite. So, Betz, I'll let you start first. How do we contextualize Egbuka, his season moving forward?
It's all Gronk's fault, dude. Literally all Gronk's fault. From the pre-Egbigbu moment on national TV, this guy was dominating. 18 fantasy points per game, 89 receiving yards per game. After that happened, 41.1 yards per game, 6.2 fantasy points per game. So Gronk, thanks so much for ruining our beloved Egbuka. It's so tricky because in some ways, we kind of knew regression would hit for him throughout the course of the season. If you guys recall early on, he was running white hot on touchdown production. Not that his peripherals weren't also good, but he was just scoring like every week and sometimes twice. And it's like, okay, that will eventually come back down. But it's so weird because the timing of the fall off kind of correlated with like when Baker started to get really banged up. Remember, played through the shoulder injury. I think there's going to be more news that we get in the offseason where it's like, oh, he had a knee scope, stuff like that. He just did not look healthy. And then Mike Evans also coming back and Chris Godwin getting healthier down the stretch. So it was almost like, not that we should have seen it coming from this level of fall off, but anybody that expected him to stay as like the wide receiver 2 or whatever he was through the first 5 or 6 weeks probably was misled in terms of what we were getting. Now, zooming out, I still think he is a very talented player, and I certainly want pass catchers with Baker Mayfield. I know this past year was not great, but largely over the last couple seasons, we've seen him support really, really good high-end wide receiver seasons, and Mike Evans is yet another year older. So I'm still very much in on him, even though I know it's really tough to say that with what we saw for basically 2 months down the stretch.
Are we going to find out something about Baker after, like in a week or two? I like to the point of not just the physical part, but so he was so bad. To give you a stat, he was the worst against man coverage of any quarterback over the last 4 years. The worst of any quarterback, not just like he was worse than Dylan Gabriel. And I feel like the team had no answers. So is this going to fix itself is really the question.
They get a new OC this next year. We don't know who it is yet, but another one for Baker to learn another system.
Greg Roman, freshly available. So
yeah, let go. Thank goodness.
I don't know, but Jason, what do you think about just the Buccaneers moving forward? Because I'm assuming Evans isn't back, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think if he wants to come back, they'll have him back.
Yeah, Mike Evans, we experienced this. You've experienced this back in the day. I guess it worked out a little different with Julio. But with like Larry was past his prime, was making tons of money, was past his prime. And the way that the Cardinals, maybe because they weren't a good enough franchise, they put Larry ahead of the franchise. It was basically, Larry, what do you want to do? We'll do whatever you want to do. You want to retire? We'll let you retire. You want to go? We'll let you go. You want to sign here? We'll let you sign here. It was just his decision. I feel like that's almost where Mike Evans is. He is like the Tampa Bay Buccaneer now at this point in his career. And so if he wants to come back and play, he'll play. I think he'll come back and play. I don't think he wants to leave on a sub-1,000-yard season. In fact, I think he's going to play several more years. But I don't have a crystal ball on that. What I do think is that Emeka Egbuka is a great wide receiver. He was a my guy for me this year, which felt super great the first half of the season as basically the best rookie wide receiver we've seen in a long, long time. Absolutely dominant, great hands, great route running, great connection, reliability. He was just a pro's pro as a rookie, which is why I loved him coming out. He was, I said in the draft process, Tetairoa McMillan is a higher fantasy, big bada boom, but the best wide receiver in this draft class is Emeka Egbuka. He didn't not remember how to play wide receiver. He's not a bad wide receiver despite the end. And really, to me, this is Baker Mayfield. The catchable balls that Emeka Egbuka got were few and far between. And I think they were so surprising he would drop them too often. But look at those first 11 weeks versus the last 8 games played from not Emeka Egbuka, from Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's splits at that point in time, starting in week 11, he went from 64% completion percentage down to 62%. He was on pace for 4,100 yards. Then he was down to 3,100 yards. 1,000 yards less was his pace. 30 passing touchdown pace to 21. And a 4 interception pace? Like he was, MVP. 30 touchdowns, 4 picks was the pace he was on. To 19 interceptions. That was his pace in the last 8 weeks. Baker sucked. And I really think he was banged up because just the way that, Emeka Egbuka is not a bad wide receiver. Baker's not a bad quarterback. We've seen Baker play poorly before, get kicked out of Cleveland, washed out of Carolina. So it's a little scary that maybe he doesn't figure it out. But I'm hoping that it's injury, and I'll probably be back in coming next year.
Jason Moore, known Baker Mayfield hater. Just known.
Is that what just came through?
Well,
I love Baker.
I know you do.
On top of the Baker health question marks, we also need to remember this offensive line was like shuffling the entire season. Remember that? Like Tristan Wirfs towards the end of the year missed time. He also missed time at the start of the year. They shuffled in a different guard. The right tackle was in and out of the lineup. I think when you look back on the season, obviously we don't want to just make excuses for players over and over again because that kind of gets you in trouble sometimes in Dynasty. But I think for this specific situation, in hindsight, when we take a step back and analyze the totality of the Bucs, it kind of makes sense in some degrees. And I'm not saying the fall off should have been this drastic, but it does make sense when you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Offensive line, Baker, all the things we talked about. So I'm glad I don't know Kyle's opinion, but I feel like Jason and I are still in on Mr. Big Boo.
Yeah, if you just look at the totality of the season, he earned a target on 26% of its routes. That's like 92nd percentile over the last decade for a rookie. So in terms of the marks we want for a rookie wide receiver, a 23% target share. He was pretty good against zone. I care about all that stuff. He's fine. It was just so boosted at the beginning of the year that now the question is how far does he fall? I think he's probably in that top 15 range still, which is really good. Would you rather have him? I'll give you some other Ohio State wide receivers. Him or Garrett Wilson in Dynasty?
Betz.
Oh, man. I don't know if I can answer that without knowing who's playing quarterback.
And I'm going to throw in Olave too, by the way.
Oh, man.
Kyle, don't do this. I think I would take Egbuka over Wilson, but I don't feel good about that.
There's a 2-year gap between those two wide receivers and Egbuka.
Oh, that is so tough. I don't know.
Age? You're saying there's a 2-year age gap?
I don't think it's that big, but Olave's going to get paid this offseason.
You will?
Yeah, yeah, he should, right? He's coming into his 5th year. He was a first rounder, so he'll have his 5th year option picked up, I'm sure.
Yes. Or they'll work out a deal. I think I'd still rather have Egbuka, but it's close. All right, I want to quickly mention these last 2 wide receivers before we head out. It's Luther Burden, who anytime I've ever put out any tweet about Luther Burden, the Bears fans come out of the woodworks and they think he's the greatest thing that's ever happened. Also, whenever I put out stuff about Matthew Golden, the Bears fans come in and they remind everyone. They're really good at reminding everybody. Luther Burden only had 60 targets on the season. It's not a lot to work with. It took a long time. In fact, you can get a lot of statistics where it's like Zacchaeus was more involved for a long portion of the season, right? Where it was like Burden wasn't the dude. But the yards per route run is historic. It's the highest for a rookie wide receiver. That was drafted in rounds 1, 2, and 3. So he was really, really good on a per route basis. A lot of his stuff was crossers. It was the highest rate of any wide receiver in the NFL. 24% of his routes were crossers. My question is there a certain point where his hype is way too high?
Maybe. I think it's possible.
Like, for instance, he's now in the range where I'm seeing him in the top 20 of Dynasty wide receivers. And even I'm seeing some people say, I'd rather have Burden than Egbuka. But that is obviously like sentiment over the last month or so. So
yeah, of course, because in fantasy championship week, like I was the wide receiver 1, right? It just went crazy against the Niners. And like if Egbuka did the reverse where it's like, okay, he was really slow for the first 8 weeks and then he did what he did in the first half and the second half, I think the sentiment around these players would feel a lot different. I think I would take probably draft capital as the deciding kind of coin flip there on these 2 players. I still think he's going to be a very good asset to have on your dynasty roster. But I also think it's important to note there's going to be weeks where I think it's possible Burden kind of not disappears, but is not the focal point because of Mr. Loveland. And Rome Odunze was out for a lot of the stretch where he was kind of coming on late in the year. So it's a weird offense that I'm not sure we know yet how these pieces are going to fit together next year.
Yeah, I know that's been a point that Jason's brought up numerous times about Rome Odunze not being there. How do we figure this out? How do we figure that out with Loveland? But Jason, any final thoughts on Burden before we sign off?
I'm excited for him, but he reminds me of a gadget type of player where he'll have explosive games, be very volatile. He'll have very limited production in a lot of games. And so I'm excited for him as a prospect, as just an NFL player from a fantasy perspective. I'm a little bit more skeptical than Mike. Mike is, I don't remember if this was on air or not. He comped him to Antonio Brown.
I remember he said that. We have the receipts.
Yeah. I just want to, you were bringing up, I was doing some research over here because you were bringing up who would you rather have between Egbuka or the other Ohio State guys like Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, which Garrett Wilson, dynasty-wise, this last year, I mean, what was he, like wide receiver 8, 7, 5?
No one
entering
knows.
the season?
Yeah, entering the season. I mean, just the young hotness, leader in receptions and targets for the first couple years, such a superstar. And I'm pretty sure Olave, because of his concussion stuff, was like wide receiver 40. Like, people don't want him. Even in Dynasty, everyone's scared. But I wanted to look at their career numbers compared to one another. Who has more games played? Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson?
It's got to be Olave.
I feel like it's Wilson.
It is Wilson, 58 to 55. They're very close, 58 to 55. So Garrett Wilson has played 3 more games than Olave. Who has more receptions?
Oh,
Wilson.
This one should be easy. Wilson. 315 to 291. So not that far apart, but also 3 more games. Who has more yards? Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson?
Olave.
When you have 395 in a season, that hurts.
Yeah, Olave 3,728 to 3,644, and who has more touchdowns? Olave or Garrett Wilson?
Olave has not. Other than this year, it's not been a lot of touchdowns.
But this year put him ahead.
Yeah,
it did. 19 to 18. So basically, more yards, more touchdowns, fewer games than Garrett Wilson. They're the same exact age. I don't know, man. One of them's got a quarterback.
Don't tell me how to have a good time. talked about Chris Olave and put more hope in him than almost anybody else in the league. And it's hurt for years. And this year was great. So we will talk more rookies. So the rookies we didn't get to talk about, Jaden Higgins. You guys want to hear about Matthew Golden? We'll talk about Travis Hunter this offseason, all those guys. We need to make sure to talk about all those guys. They're available in the Dynasty Pass. We will talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.